me pull up a clip from the what you call it. Let me pull up a clip from my past work, and you could see uh what it looked like back then. You know what I mean? What did it look like? And it
You know,
looked like
we got to get
this.
Zeshin back, by the way. If anybody hasn't seen the episode, go back and check that out. But
Yeah. So here's like a little clip from there. This was a cipher, ciphers at an event called DJ Extravaganza. And yeah, it was like this. It was like no one was really good just yet. It was just kind of like this was 2,000 people. There's barely 2,000 people at a breaking event nowadays, but this is like, just to be very frank, half of these are women or girls that were kind of like fans of the dancers. So it's very even as far as attendance. You know what I'm saying?
I think one of the big things in this, why the attendance was crazy and there was no competition, there was no prize money, is they had
not yet.
dopamine built up from trying to go and find the gems, or aka the unexpected, because that's what this era was about. From what I know, you'd see a b-boy you never seen before, you'd see, and they'd be doing moves you've never seen before.
Yeah.
Something psychologically, when you see the unexpected, which is a lost thing in this day and age, as we're live streaming everything and everyone's recording their new moves on Instagram and posting every day about it. The unexpected, there's a dopamine tied to that makes us addicted to it. And it's kind of interesting. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, like where it is in this day and age. We don't have that anymore. Nobody's they're not incentivized to go to a jam, really.
No. It's a different. That's what I'm saying. Like when I was talking to when we were talking to Zeshin last episode, you could check that on his channel. I come from an era before VHS, so like that was a whole camera setup. You know what I'm saying? To like
the big
for that event, yeah, you needed like a tripod, and like you had to hook up your VCR to a camera if it didn't have a built-in tape to record it on. So that was a whole production. So tapes were rare. So those things got passed, and that was the only way you had information, and we had limited information. So back then it was just really the experience. It was the experience of going to an event. You know what I mean? Like that was the whole thing. It was the experience of going to an event and seeing what was going to happen, seeing if you were going to get into a battle, seeing if you were going to get props, seeing, and like that was in Alameda, or no, that was in Santa Clara. So that was like, 30 miles south of where I used to live. So that's coming into enemy territory, right? It's like you're going to war. You don't know what's going to happen.
The unexpected.
So, yeah. So like
there's an addictive trait tied to seeking the unexpected, and that's what.
Here's the other thing too, is that since there was no tapes, everything was word of mouth. You heard of this guy, and hopefully you'll see him there.
Yeah.
Because you heard about him, and then you finally see that person's like, oh shit. Then because you have your imagination, creating the story in your head of like, I've never seen Gideon before. Who's Gideon? He's this guy. He's killing it. And then you finally see him, and then you're like, it's either like, is everything you expected and more, or it's like, it's not that great. But it's just like, but that's how you got your name out there. It was word of mouth. It was like people talking to you on the telephone. Like, I went to this jam and I heard about this guy, and then he killed it. It was like that. It was a lot like that. So it was just you had to experience it, right? Because you had to get out of the house.
Yeah, it was the music too, right? It was the music.
Yeah, 100 at that time.
SoundCloud, you didn't have YouTube, you didn't have people were digging a lot more. They had to get it the hard way, and that
you were more connected to the other elements too. Like for instance, we at that event we were invited by a DJ group called Lot of Sounds out of Alameda because they saw us dance, so we were dancing for them in there. Because the whole thing of that event, which was crazy, is that there was 5 DJ setups, and then they would each get a turn in a certain part of the night, like maybe a 30-minute slot, and then they would have, maybe this had the best lighting. I think second to none from South San Francisco, they had a hydraulic press, so they had like the turntables go all the way up to the roof while they're mixing. And that's our whole presentation.
So,
and
so
so
what
it
I'm
was just
getting
like
from this
that. It was
era,
like we were more related and together. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, for sure. And that made the community bigger, right? The social validation stronger,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
in this era right here, what age would you say you were and the general crowd was? Was it
I was
teen?
16. I was 16 at
Okay.
the time. So
Okay,
everyone was
cool.
about 16, 17. You know, obviously some of the people that were throwing together were like maybe 20. So the whole thing is this is pre-club era for us.
Yeah.
When you're old enough to go into a club. This is the closest thing we could go to a club, but this was actually got bigger. And I saw someone comment too, like about like we had raves. Like this is like raves were going on at the same time this we did that, but this was more hip hop community.
Yeah.
Raves at the time was just white people. At the time, it was just white kids. For us, this was the scene. You know what I mean? It wasn't, you know, that's why it's like reminding them, and Ivan and them, they come from the rave scene. Circle Fire comes from the rave scene, but they weren't old enough yet to go to this. They were 13 when this was going on. I
Flora.
was 16.
I was
Yeah.
surprised to hear that Flora came from the rave scene too. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. A lot of B-boys came from the rave scene. And, you know, I hit it up one time and I was like, this is kind of cool, but everyone's high. So I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, that's what was my opinion. This is not hip hop. Everything's listening to drum and bass or techno and I wasn't into that shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah. So that was like the experiential part. And this is close to like, honestly, when I showed this clip, you know, when I talked to Breakbeat Lou, they were talking the first Hevalo and the Herc stuff was like this. It was like a mirror to this. This was just 20 years later, but it was like a mirror, or 15 years later, but it was a mirror. You know what I'm saying? It was maybe not the same music, but the vibe was the same. You know what I mean? The vibe was the same. It was about the DJ, and then you go to the DJs, and that's where everyone was at. You know what I'm saying?
So you felt like you connected to this, you were connecting to a culture.
Yeah.
Felt, right?
Yeah.
The social element of it,
Yep.
you know, the expressive element of it as well. Everyone was kind of younger, and you know, I can parallel to that as well. But when we get into high school or towards the end of high school, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. There's this thing called bills, and
Yeah.
we actually need money to survive.